I'm here with my friend Richard Scott. Hello, Richard.
It's good to be here as ever.
Indeed. Now, let me just jump into a question. It was sent to Anne Lord Jackson about sensory health, but I think there's an interesting physiological element. Now, the question for Anne was about the noise of an aircon unit and how it can affect us and all that, which is very much sensory health. But what I was interested in is, how do we deal with temperatures as human beings? Because obviously in the summer it gets warmer, winter colder. We understand that. Me personally, I like colder, not warmer, because I can get warmer easier than I can get colder. But is there a temperature at which we just no longer safely function?
Yes, but it'll be different for different people, I think is the message. So what we do classically in cold temperatures is shrink. Constrict the blood vessels to the peripheries, to the hands, to the feet, so that all the blood is diverted to our core to keep our core, so thorax and abdomen, warm. And sending it to the brain, obviously, as well. And then in hot temperatures, we do the opposite. We increase the blood flow to the periphery so that we can lose heat more easily from blood vessels under the skin. And of course, sweating is very much part of that as well. Interesting. I was just learning about my dog the other day, because my poor old dog has been struggling a bit in the heat, especially if she's daft and runs around and with a fur coat on. However, not only does she pant, but I discovered that apparently dogs can sweat through their paws. There we are. That's something I learned. So there's something for our listeners. It still means they get very, very hot very, very easily, but they can still sweat a bit through their pores. But for us, it's predominantly about controlling the blood flow to the skin.
I was just thinking, like 25 degrees, I'm starting to wilt and to melt, and I don't do well, which is why we have aircon, because we have several computers going, and it just makes it incredibly unpleasant. And we've got the windows closed, trying to save noise and all that, so it does get quite very sort of oppressive with the heat. But I was just wondering, because like temperatures, it affects how we function. Obviously then we forget to drink sometimes, or we're sweating. I know when I was in Spain one time, is it 42 43 degrees, and you don't even know you're sweating because it's evaporating faster than you know you're sweating, which is terrifying.
Yes. And it's interesting how we adapt, because I remember when I went to theological college briefly before going to work abroad in Africa, we had it was multinational. So we had lots of Africans coming to the same college to study. And the Tanzanians who were over, and that's where I went to work, the Tanzanians came over it was December. And they were just freezing, even though it wasn't a particularly cold winter. And then you could give them jumpers, you could give them coats. They were just miserable and freezing because they so weren't used to it. Then when we came back from Africa after being away for 5 years, I came back to England. And I remember going to a party, and I wore my coat inside. Was already hot, and there was music and there's people dancing around, and I felt cold because my body temperature had adapted, or what I was used to had adapted to warmer climes. And so even within one person you can change. And then of course I recovered and back to being a normal English person, although I have to say, unlike you, I prefer the heat to the cold. But it is interesting how you say what's normal for a person. Well, it depends who you are and where you live. So people who Eskimos will have a very different relationship to the cold than I will, and certainly than Africans will.
I just thought it was interesting having a little thought, because I was struck the other day of aircon's on, it's very hot, making it colder, I feel better. But of course then it gets dry, so you need to drink more, and it's long car journeys, we forget to drink, and air conditioning's on, it dries us out.
It does, absolutely, yes.
Right.
and uses more petrol.
Well, there's that as well, isn't it? Unless you've got a diesel car or electric. I mean, does it even work in electric? That's a whole different show.
A whole other show.
Right. Now, I was just sharing with you just before we came on air that we've been recently blessed with somebody who wants to buy my older two boys driving licenses, which is great. We've been praying about it for a while. We can't do that as a family. So what do you do when you can't do something? You go to God in prayer. Well, you can go to God in prayer if you are sensible, which we did. But sometimes it surprises us when God actually answers our prayer, and you think, oh, that's just a coincidence. That's just an act of kindness. Here's the thing. I'm nearly 50 years old. I cannot anymore excuse coincidences. I haven't done for about 30 years, because there comes a point when you think, no, it's not a coincidence. This is a designer God who adores every single one of us and gets involved in our lives. So this was an amazing answer to prayer. The timing of when it came in, the timing of the offer, the fact they're going to be able to get driving licenses, which we've been talking about. We wish they could have driving licenses. We do so many miles as a ministry and as an organization. them being able to go would be
How much?
huge.
Just remind me, how much are we talking about, Andy?
I think we're talking about, well, it depends where you look at it. The DVSA, which are, if you're not in the UK, it's the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency. So it's the people that basically look after interactions on the road of drivers, I guess you might say. They recommend 45 hours. I think that's a bit insane. I did a HGV Class 1 articulated truck license in about 3.5 days. I don't think you need 45 hours. Thank you very much. I'm sure the driving instructors would agree with that at 50 quid an hour, or whatever they charge. But we're guessing between 2,000 and 4,000 quid, thereabouts.
Wow. And the money's come in. Wow.
It will be, yeah. We just got to get some proper quotes. Because we hadn't expected it to be quite at this time, we've got no figures other than I think a provisional license is 35 quid, maybe more. So we've got to find even that out.
Yeah. Well, God, our God is a generous God, and
Always.
He works through people, and that was interesting because just to the listeners, Andy told that story before I came on. And I thought he must tell that story on air because I've got a story similar, and I'm calling it the God who speaks. So is that okay, Andy? That's where
No, yeah, I think go for it. It's good.
it's not so much a medical story, or there is a bit of medicine involved, but it's I'm reading a book at the moment, which I found unexpectedly in the corner of my dining room. Oh, there's a book over there. What's that doing there? Shouldn't be there. So I picked it up, and it's a book called The Power of a Whisper by a pastor from the US called Bill Hybels, big pastor, written in 2010. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Wonder why I've just picked that up just before I'm about to retire, which I then did 2 weeks ago. So I wonder if God is trying to speak into my life through this book at this time in my life. So and on the front cover, the power of a whisper, God's whisper, and on the back, how we need to hear from God, this whisper, and heed. So we need to hear and heed if we're going to have effective Christian lives. So I thought, right. Open it up, and I've nearly finished it. But as I was reading it, it got me thinking that there are times in my life when I've listened to a whisper, and I might say it sounds like the person who's funding your lad's driving licenses has just listened to a whisper from God. There are times when I've listened to whispers, and to be honest, times when I haven't. And boy, do I regret it when I haven't. But boy, does it achieve massive things when you do. And there's a lady in our church who's just listened to a whisper, which is about to change people's lives in Kenya. So if you like, this is a good news story, and I wanted to bring it to you. And it's just amazing that you brought up your lads and the driving licenses on the evening as we're doing this show, but I'm about to tell this story. So just to go through the story, I've mentioned before that this wonderful pastor that I worked with in Kenya sadly had a terrible traffic accident. He was crossing on a zebra crossing when he was hit by a motorbike in September last year, never recovered, and sadly died in January, having had brain surgery, fixed his limbs, hospital bed, so much money, because Kenya is quite expensive, especially in private hospitals in the capital, when they tried their absolute best to get him through, and God decided to take him home. Now, I run his organisation in England, which is called the Maasai Evangelistic Association, because he was a prominent Maasai tribe. And of course, now we and the family have the problem of solving the debts, getting rid of the debts that he's run up, sadly unsuccessfully, in his treatment. And they've done very well. They've sold a house out there. They've sold fields. Our organisation's raised some money. But we had a meeting recently, and there's still £8,000 of debt left. And the bank has said, look, okay, we'll leave off the interest for present as long as there is you can divide it up over the next 6 months. So, and if you don't do so, and if you default on a payment, then interest will be added. So, do you know, I'm part of an eldership in my church, which is called Hope Christian Fellowship. And this happened in January. He died in January. And every month we have meetings. And every month I've thought to myself, do I bring this to the eldership or not? And it never seemed right to do so, because we fund all sorts of things from our eldership. We meet in a school that costs £25 an hour for 3 hours. So it's very, very little. We have just a 1 day a week pastor. So he costs very little, and we get all this money coming in every week. So we're able to fund all sorts of projects, from clothing in Moldova to getting kids off a rubbish dump in Manila in the Philippines, evangelism in Kenya, and local projects, ACTS, which is Christianity in local schools in Thanet. But yeah, we fund so many things, but I never wanted to bring medical debts, and especially of someone who's died, to our fellowship. But God imprinted on my head this month, so we meet on the first Friday of the month, he said, bring it to the fellowship this month. So, okay, I'll bring it to the fellowship. So I did. I'll be honest with you, my aim was to ask for £1,000, which would be 1/8 of the debts and would deal with most of the first month's repayment. They'd given me this previously from when I've travelled to Kenya to do evangelism, but £1,000 was all I wanted. Anyway, so I rather sheepishly brought it to the elders, and I said, look, if you don't feel this is right, feel free to turn it down. I'll leave the room. You can make a decision. No, the treasurer said, that's fine. You can stay here. But by the way, you just need to know that this is a very good moment in time to bring this up. Oh, why is that? I said. Well, there was one elder who wasn't at the meeting. And the reason she wasn't at the meeting is she just sold her house and tithed the profit to the church. So I was told that there was a little bit of extra money coming to the church. I said, oh, well, that's good. But, can I have £1,000 in that case? And they chatted amongst themselves and said, no, you can have £4,000. Wow, my goodness, that's incredibly generous. That's half of the debts. I'm amazed. Thank you so much. I'll tell Kenya, the son of this pastor who's died, and he will be delighted. The best is yet to come. So our treasurer, Jill, rings this anonymous lady to say, thank you that you're tithing to the church. And by the way, this was the decision made in your absence that we were going to give Richard £4,000 to help offset this debt. And on the other side of the phone, the lady went very quiet. So Jill said to this lady after a moment, well, have we done something wrong? Is that okay? And the lady said, no, but it's the wrong number. God told me that you need to give £8,000. Wow. Now, this lady did not know about the fact that I'm raising money to solve this dead pastor's medical debts. I hadn't brought it to the fellowship before. And she certainly didn't know that the number involved was £8,000. She had no idea of it either. But God told her in a whisper, this is the amount of money you need to give to our fellowship. And she knew instantly that this is why it had to be given. And it was not only an amazing thing. I actually saw her on just Sunday just gone. I said, look, I took her aside. Can I just check the facts here? She went through it all. Yes, it's exactly as I'm presenting it to you today. And we both agreed how marvelous is our God. She didn't want it to go from the front of the church. She didn't want anybody else to know. She's anonymous. That's why I haven't mentioned her name. Amazing. But absolutely glory to God, the God who whispers. He whispers to that person who's funding your boy's driving. He's whispered to this lady in Margate who's just in one fell swoop abolished the debts. And these guys are doing amazing things. They're feeding widows. They're rescuing girls from FGM and forced marriage. They're, doing food banks. They're doing all sorts of things, but were really hampered by the ongoing debts, which had to be paid. Now they can just carry on, put all their energies into these other worthwhile projects, whilst giving glory to God. So, I guess my message tonight is we have an amazing God who speaks. Guys and girls, open your ears. All of us can hear him or we can miss him. But when we hear him, oh my goodness, the difference he makes to all of our lives.
The thing about finance is, I was having this chat with someone else. The problem about finance is it gets us so anxious so easily. It can get us really uptight. It can put stress on. I mean, marriages, one of the biggest problems in marriages is about money, how you spend it or how you don't spend it. So money is a massive thing. And when you have debt, it's even more of a sort of acute struggle because it's all that you can think of. I mean, Christians Against Poverty do phenomenal work here in the UK, helping people get out of debt. They've been showing recently that people are getting into debt through no fault of their own. They're not misspending, they're not overspending, they're not having frivolous. They just start the month, they're both working full time and they can't pay their bills. That is a state of the UK. That's not okay. But that's what debt does. It cripples us. And it's exactly the same any nation in the world. For the people that you're helping, the other side of the world, you're helping them get rid of debt because it's like this crippling weight.
It is, absolutely. And God knows that. I mean, Jesus actually spoke loads, didn't he, about money? How we manage our money is the litmus test for how our faith is going. But this lady, who we often call our prophet, because she does seem to hear from God sometimes better than the rest of us. But it was just an illustration. Here I am reading this book on the importance of hearing from God, and he's just given me a practical example of the importance of hearing from God. And the difference it makes. And we just need to open our ears more clearly and give God time to speak and say to him, Lord, I need to hear from you in whatever area it is. It might be relationships, it might be money, it might be whatever, your job. and as I'm newly retired, Lord, I need to hear from you because, I've still got energy, some abilities. What do you want to do with them? I need to hear from you. And I think we need to say that to our God, the God who speaks more often, and then open our ears.
Which brings up the other point of when we can sort of shout at God, why aren't you doing this? I mean, so many films from so many decades have touched on the same thing, that we're all shouting at God, what are you going to do? Why aren't you doing this, God? You failed there, you failed here. And then the film was sort of look at God saying, yes, but I sent you and you've not done it.
Yeah.
And you can make the difference. And I think that is really powerful. We've seen a myriad of miracles. We wrote the book Pure 247 about the first year of our life doing Pure, because it was full of nightmares, situations, and full of miracles. And the thing is, the miracles that we can see, they happen alongside some of the difficulties that we see, because that's what makes them a miracle. 50p on the floor isn't necessarily a miracle unless you've got no money and that's the 50p that you need, that you've been praying for, at which point that inconsequential amount of money to one person becomes a miracle to another. And that is the beauty of God and his attention to the smallest of detail for each of our lives.
His attention to detail, that's absolutely it. Yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, it's funny. We get excited, we get surprised, and thinking. And as you said earlier to me, get excited by all means. Don't be surprised.
Yeah,
this is what God does. This is who He is.
And yet we're still surprised. So freaky. We've been praying for passports. That was sorted a completely different way, randomly. We're praying for driving licenses because we don't have the funds for that. Really want the boys to drive. I learned to drive at 17. I had a trust fund. It paid for that. Jo learned when she had a really good job, and that helped her to pay for her tests and lessons and all that. But, we don't have that funds for our boys because of how God has led us to live our life. But God cares about the details. My boys don't need to drive. There's no human need for that. It's not like air or water or food, but there is a need for that because it's about their own self-worth. It's about their own ability. It's about what we're doing as a ministry and an organization. So God does care about these things. I get very frustrated, as I know you do, when it's all that, and we're after the blessings and God wants me to have a Ferrari and a house in the Seychelles, and probably not, actually, but God does want to equip you for what he's called you to do. The real question is, what has he called you to do, and are you actually waiting for him to help you?
Yes, I mean, I've often talked about how God doesn't answer Ferrari prayers,
yes,
Lamborghini prayers, but and actually, when we put ourselves in need of His touch, in other words, we stretch ourselves, we get out of the boat, get out of our comfort zones, and suddenly, we need God, because if He doesn't turn up, we're in big doo-doo. Actually, that's when God tends to supply things, and if we're too comfortable and not needing God's touch, then probably it's, as I've just said, we're too comfortable. We should be using what we've got. And when you read the Hybels book, he was a well-off pastor in America, and God really broke his heart for the poor. And suddenly his sort of visions were expanded to think, gosh, I need to use what I have better. And then it talks about the journey he was led on. So yeah, there's just, yeah, it's amazing. And I want to hear from God more, as I get older. I don't want to hear from him less. I want to hear from him more, because time is shorter, and there's still plenty of things I'm hoping that he'll use me to do.
Amen. It's funny how money can become such an issue. I've seen people who we can't do this, we can't do that. We're waiting for the money, and I look at them, with multiple houses, multiple holidays. We've got no money. God's got to provide it. Well, sell a house or a caravan. Get rid of a holiday. I remember a guy years ago, and his wife came to a house group. Oh, I'm so stressed. I've got to book 4 2-week holidays, all these foreign locations for our family. It's so anxiety creating and stressful. And I was shedded for those. And the lady next to me, we said, well, we haven't been on holiday for the last 10 years, either of us. Here's about you give one of those holidays to us. We'll remove the stress from you. You'll remove the stress from us, and everyone's a winner. But that's not how we necessarily want to think.
Sure, that's very good. I like that.
But it's about using what God's given us, and God gives us these amazing gifts and resources. I'm also reminded that Jesus, when he was with his disciples, had a treasurer. They had a purse. They had an amount of money. Jesus went to pay the temple tax. Okay, he got it from a fish. Quite cool. But, he had a need of money just like the rest of us. He wasn't devoid of that. And that always strikes me, because it's easy to think, well, Jesus was all this and that. He was God. Yes, he was. And he was doing whatever he likes. Yeah, but he submitted himself to physical law and to human people. So yeah, he could have made mahogany cabinets if they had mahogany in his realm. Could have magicked it up, I suppose, to some extent, but he had to work hard. I'm sure he had splinters and he banged his thumb sometimes because otherwise he wouldn't be human.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good reminder.
As much as it sounds like it's heresy, but it's really not. Honestly. Right. Thank you, Richard. You're in the magazine as well, which is good. So I'm going to hold up now so you can see this if you're looking. This is the front cover. We print these off once a month. So I have a little picture frame. You can see the pictures behind me. So that's The Chosen on the front cover. Peter, you've watched The Chosen. Is that right?
Oh, it's fantastic, and I'll just little plug for it because I wasn't at all sure I was going to like it because I knew that they took the Bible and slightly expanded the stories, bring the characters to life. And I watched the first 2 episodes of series 1, and I thought, not sure about this, but I'd heard from somebody else. Just watched number 3, and as soon as I got into number 3, I thought, my goodness, this has got me. And I've watched every program in every series since. In fact, the series 5 has just started, so we watched the first one the other day. Fantastic, and it really it enthuses your faith. The Jesus himself is fantastic, I have to say. Peter is a very good character. Matthew is wonderful. Now, I would just say to people, if you're not sure, simply give it a go. Watch The Chosen. Stick out the first two episodes if you're not quite sure. Keep going, and you simply won't regret it. And to be honest, most of us watch box series from time to time. Just leave off your Scandi noirs and the other things that you can watch. Detective series. Check out The Chosen. Very good.
And if you want a couple of exclusive interviews to us, courtesy of my friend Andy Godfrey, our movie reviewing legend, that is in the issue, which is not printed. This is just the front cover, but that's in the August edition of Pure Media, the magazine, in which Richard also appears writing. Richard, thank you, and we're back for more. Now, if you want to ask any questions to Richard, you can do. Email is always good. hello@pure247radio.org. hello@pure247radio.org, and you can ask your questions to Richard, who has been a doctor for quite a number of years and recently retired.
Thank you, Andy. That's nicely put.
Thank you. Take care.